Welcome to the Aldinga Arts Eco Village. I want to talk to you about this intentional community. So an intentional community is something that comes about with some shared values. And this one came around for environmental awareness, or sort of permaculture principles as well, and the arts. There are about 200 households here on a block with some shared space amongst those households. So there's common land amongst them with, fruit trees and nature, as well as some community shared indoor spaces. And then there's also the farm, which is right next to the village, that everyone shares too. So for food production, lots of people grow their own food in their garden like we do and have some of their own chickens. But we also have shared growing spaces. So within the village, there's some small community garden spots. And then next to the village, there's a farm. So it's still shared by all of us, and it's got a feral-proof fence around it. So that fence means that foxes and cats can't get in to get things like the chickens over there, but also rabbits can't get in. So that helps us grow veggies a bit easier out there. Out on that farm, there is a market garden where a small business is growing vegetables and selling them. And there's also some community growing spaces as well, like an allotment. And the allotment is 10 households who've come together and they're all growing in blocks next to each other. There's some really big orchards under some netting, and they're the shared ones as well. And over there are some chicken co-ops and a goat co-op. So that's where a bunch of households have come together and they have some shared chickens or goats, and you rotate who looks after them. So for example, in the goat co-op, there's 7 households, and so each household has 1 day a week where they look after the goats and milk the goats and then get that milk. And that would be the same with the chickens and getting their eggs. So waste is another thing that you want to sort of think about with sustainability. Obviously at a household level, we try and reduce our own waste. So lots of people in the village try and recycle lots and compost at home and just reduce the amount of plastic, all those sorts of things. But then it's also really important that we try and reduce the amount of bins we put out for them to come and collect, even if that's recycling or anything, because it takes energy for the trucks to come and lift the bins. So we actually have shared bins. You could do this with a neighbour as well. You can have shared bins and then it's put out less often. But also waste, I don't really like the term waste because there's no such thing as waste. It's kind of, lots of things are resources, so we actually want to recycle them and use them because they're good materials. And an example of that, what we do in the village, is here we have our composting. So we get all our veggie scraps and fruit scraps, we get our green leaves and things from the garden and all that sort of stuff, and it's composted here with volunteers, and we put it in these big compost heaps. And then that, once it becomes compost, it goes out onto the shared, it goes out onto the orchards and the shared village fruit trees. It's really important for a place to have a sense of community too, and places to gather. So we do have lots of outdoor places where we can gather and meet, and as well as that, we have an indoor community hall or a sharing shed. This will allow us to have events and workshops and do things together. And when you're thinking about sort of community spaces, you've got to think about all age groups and who can enjoy them. So included in that was some of our kids, and they said they were keen to have a rock climbing wall. So we now have that in the sharing shed too. The layout of the community means that there are houses, but there's also common land and shared land between. Some of that's for food, some of it's for nature and biodiversity. And also we've got to think about when it rains a lot, where's that water going to go in the land? So some of it will seep into the ground, but sometimes there's extra water, especially if our tanks are full and maybe overflowing a bit too. So all that water then comes into a series of ponds that go through the village. And that means we slow the water down, we keep some of that water in the ponds for nature, and then it eventually makes its way down to the creek. For energy, we want to think about how we produce it. So every household here has solar, and we even have solar on our shared community shed here. Once we've got renewable energy, we also want to think about how we use it. So we want to reduce any way we're using energy, and particularly in our households and our buildings, that's reducing our heating and cooling, which uses a lot of energy. We can also think about things like batteries, so some of the households have batteries here. And the community here has talked about having sort of shared battery or shared energy systems, which we'll still look at, and when it's financially viable and it goes with the legislation and things, we might look at that too. Thanks for joining us on this video tour of the Aldinga Arts Eco Village community.